Okay, so in this part of the competition, you're taking on a fictional business identity and assigning a fictional business identity to the judges. Please make sure everyone knows who you are and who they are before you begin. You'll have 25 minutes to describe the legal, financial, and ethical dimensions of the problem and to recommend a solution that passes muster on all three counts. During this time, teams will be uninterrupted. When you are finished, the judges will ask you questions for 20 minutes. Then during the Q&A, both you and the judges will stay in character. After the Q&A, the judges will give you feedback outside of the role that they're playing. Some important things to keep in mind. The ethical aspects of your analysis are the most important part. However, these should be described in simple, practical, common sense fashion. Using technical, philosophical terminology or basing your argument on religious or theological grounds will be considered a serious weakness. Similarly, any member of the team reading his or her part will also be considered a major mistake, although you may use notes. During this presentation, every member of the team must have some sort of speaking role. Start with the introductions.
Sure. Good morning. My name is Nina Johnson. I work in the Executive MBA Planning Department at
Good morning, my name is Robert Campbell. I have served as a Chief Audit Executive for major government. I'm currently the Chief of Investigations. I oversee a law enforcement operation investigating fraud, waste, abuse, and public corruption.
Hello, I'm Mahmoud Dumrai. I'm a professor at LMU. Been around for 30 years. I've judged every one of these competitions every year. My background is accounting, and I've been consultant and administrator in the college for the past few years.
My name is Ashley Wilson, and I'm an attorney. I'm general counsel of a company that is privately owned by a private equity company, but I've also worked for public companies, excuse me, family-owned companies. So we're really looking forward to your presentation, and whenever you're ready, please start.
Do you guys understand your role from our executive summary?
Please.
So you guys will be Juul's board of directors. So we'll be speaking to Juul, the company, today. And we would just be consultants to Juul.
Nicotine is the #1 cause of preventable death in the United States, killing over 480,000 American citizens every year, costing upwards of $170 billion in annual health costs. For the last 50 years, the FDA and the CDC have worked tirelessly to reduce the current smoking rate to historic lows. However, a new player has entered the market, seeking to undermine all the hard work that the government has been doing at the cost of creating a new generation hooked on nicotine. Hello, we're the University of Florida graduate team, and today we are going to be talking about e-cigarettes saving or creating an addiction. Let us begin the story of the history of smoking in the United States and how the FDA was able to achieve their goals of lowering the nicotine and smoking rates over time. As you can see here, over the past 50 years, there's been a gradual decrease in annual smoking rates for adult users. Now, in 1964, this all began when the U.S. Surgeon General report officially recognized the health risks of tobacco. Then, in 1965, Congress followed suit by requiring all cigarette packages carry warning labels about their health risks. Then, in 1970, television and radio advertisements were banned. In 1988, smoking is banned on U.S. flights 2 hours or less, which later led over into all flights not being allowed to have cigarette use on planes. And then finally, in 1997, a tobacco company CEO went on trial and admitted that cigarettes and tobacco products cause cancer. This ensued a series of legal battles facing big tobacco. Now, let's shift the story and talking about teen cigarette use and the rates in the United States. In 2000, the CDC started conducting what's known as the National Youth Tobacco Survey, in which the teen cigarette usage rate was around 28%. Over time, in 2011, this was brought down to 15.8%. However, a new player has emerged into the market, e-cigarettes, and the CDC began tracking e-cigarette use at a low 1.5%. However, teens quickly decided to make a transfer, and this product was highly attractive to teenagers. Thus, in 2014, e-cigarettes eclipsed the rate of those smoking cigarettes by 13.4%. And then in 2018 now, 1 in 5 high school students are using e-cigarettes on a regular basis. Thus, the previous FDA commissioner has deemed vape culture an epidemic on our society. Our key takeaway here is that the rapid growth of young people's use of e-cigarettes has threatened to erase decades of progress by the government to bring smoking rates down to historic lows. Now, let's continue with an overview of the e-cigarette market.
So as you can see, cigarettes are the past and e-cigarettes are the future. E-cigarettes are a battery-powered cigarette nicotine device that resembles the user experience of an actual cigarette user. So it allows for 2 main drivers. There is an improved user experience compared to cigarettes. So e-cigarettes lack the adverse effects of actual cigarettes. They lack having bad breath and stained teeth and really hone in on the sensation of smoking. They also have a sleek product design. So there has been 4 iterations of e-cigarettes throughout the years. And the last iteration is very sleek and slim, and it's easy to use and it's easy to hide. However, before, the battery used to be weaker and it used to be overall clunkier technology. But the one main concept between these e-cigarettes and cigarettes is that there is nicotine in both. Nicotine is an ingredient that's in both that is very addictive and can really cause issues within young adults using it with risk of mood and attention problems. So currently right now, teens have a varied sense of what e-cigarettes are and how they're supposed to be used. Right now, the perception is 66% believe it's just flavoring. However, 13% only believe that nicotine is within it. So as you can see, we have a huge opportunity to educate the youth on what e-cigarettes are and how they should be used properly. So in reality, it's not only just nicotine within e-cigarettes, it's also flavoring, volatile organic compounds, and heavy metals. So as you can see, e-cigarettes can be just as addictive as normal cigarettes. And this is a case study about the National Institute of Drug Abuse. So current e-cigarette users who are teens are 4 times more likely to go back to cigarette use than normal non-users. So teens are really susceptible to this change and can be very impressionable at this age. Now I'll pass it on to Susie to talk about legal.
One of the key ethical issues we looked at was the fact that the e-cigarette market and the e-cigarettes were invented in essence to solve a public health problem and help smokers wean off actual cigarettes into what they call a safer product. However, in these companies trying to solve a problem, they created another problem, which is the fact that now these products are attractive to teens. So one of the key issues is whether or not these benefits are going to outweigh the problems that have been caused. So one of the issues with this is that e-cigarettes are creating a second generation of addicts. In a Yale Medicine study that came out in November of 2018, there is currently no scientifically proven method for vaping addicts to stop being addicted to that product. So while cigarette users have proven methods as to how they can wean themselves off that addiction, vaping users would theoretically have to use that process, but it's not scientifically proven yet based on the research whether or not it's actually going to work and they can stop being addicted. So that's problem number 1. Problem number 2 is that teens are highly at risk here because their brains are still developing at that age, and so the high content of nicotine present in these products is causing them problems and hurting their brain development. So that's one of the reasons we're trying to tackle this issue today in our case study. And third is that minors are especially impressionable and they do lack capacity because of their brains, the fact that their brains are still developing to make decisions. And so that's why companies and the government is stepping in, trying to figure out how can we protect these minors' rights and make sure that they are being treated in a way so they can make safe decisions and not create a second generation of addicts like we had in the past. So the FDA has stepped in. The first thing they did was in August of 2018, they mandated that all e-cigarette manufacturers had to have a warning label on their products. So similar to the ones you'd see on any cigarette that you bought in a drugstore, there's a warning label telling you that nicotine is addictive. So e-cigarettes are now have to have that exact same thing. In September of 2018, the FDA enacted what was called the 60-day rule. And so what that is was all e-cigarette manufacturers, so Juul, Mark 10, amongst others, had 60 days to provide the FDA with a plan as to how they were going to tackle the youth vaping epidemic. Then by November 2018, the FDA rolled out the rest of their plan. So two key regulations out of this plan were, one, free samples of e-cigarettes are no longer allowed. So companies like Juul and Mark 10 and Blue, amongst others, were handing out free samples to young adults in different locations, and that was one of the reasons this whole epidemic got started. And the second key regulation from this is that those types of companies are no longer allowed to sponsor music festivals or art festivals, which are traditionally areas where many young adults gather and spend a lot of time. And lastly, by August 2021, all companies that manufacture e-cigarettes must submit flavor plans to the FDA. So what this means is they have to submit different plans as to the ingredients, how they manufacture these products, and the FDA will then decide whether or not that flavor can remain on the market and it's something that can be sold. And so while the FDA tackled the teen epidemic and saw them as the primary stakeholder, there are other stakeholders we considered in making our solution. So some of these include schools and teachers who are dealing with this problem on their campuses and in the classroom. We also talked about how parents and families are being affected if kids are using these products, and of course health professionals dealing with the medical impacts and the costs of some of the things that are going on. So why did we talk about Juul instead of talking about any other company? And the reason is that over the past 2 years, Juul has captured about 3/4 of the entire e-cigarette market. So right now they're at 75.3%, and their closest second is British American Tobacco, but they only have a 9.6% share of the market. So Juul is our primary target here just because they've captured so much of that market. And while there's so many issues going on, as many have read and heard about in the media and in public relations, Juul still projects the sales forecast for 2019 to be 3 times what it was in 2018. So the company is still expecting to be profitable at this time. Another ethical issue that we looked into was whether the mission statement of the company truly aligned with the actions and the practices that were going on in the past. And we found that it did not. So the mission statement of the company is that you are trying to target the 1 billion adult smokers in the world, and you want to help them get off this addiction. However, based on free samples given out, the sponsorships of music events, different marketing practices, we found that what the intent of the mission statement said did not match up with the actions that were happening at the time. And so we evaluated that problem on 4 different criteria, which are nicotine, flavoring, marketing, and the distribution of these products. And I'm going to pass it on to my colleague Olivia to talk to you about this.
So we did a deep dive into each of these 4 focus areas, and we're going to look at first the unethical practices that happened, the government response, and then Juul's response to that. So beginning with nicotine. So Juul currently provides pods with 5% nicotine. That's roughly 3 times the amount of nicotine that any other competitor on the market is currently providing. And for perspective, 3% nicotine content was intended for a smoker who currently smokes 2 packs a day. Furthermore, Juul has an inconsistent labeling problem. So while most competitors in the market actually label their nicotine content by volume, Juul's labeling it by weight. So to give an example of this, a 5% nicotine volume by weight would actually be 5.9% by volume. So this is deceiving consumers and making them actually intake more nicotine than they would previously be aware of. So what was the government response to this? The FDA implemented mandatory nicotine warning labels, as Susie mentioned, and has actually sent over 40 warning letters to these e-cigarette companies. If we look abroad to other nations like Israel or the European Union, they have imposed a roughly 1.7 nicotine content restriction on e-cigarettes. So how can we in the United States follow suit to some of our examples by peers abroad? And then finally, what was Juul's response to this? Well, Juul has introduced a 3% nicotine content pod, but it's limited in scope, and from our research we found that it's very hard to find in brick and mortar locations and mostly only online. And a lot of our shoppers are shopping in brick and mortar locations. So we see the opportunity for improvement in our nicotine focus area as very high. Next, let's look at flavoring. So as we previously mentioned, 66% of teens believe that in their Juul it's only flavoring. And this problem is being exacerbated by very fun flavors that resemble candy. Things like mango, mint, fruit, creme brulee. So this is all attracting adolescents because it's fun, it's tasty. A CDC report says that flavors are the second most common reason for adolescents to adopt e-cigarettes. So what are we doing by offering all of these great flavors that are so attractive? The government response to this has been that the FDA has banned flavors, except for some of the most common ones, from being sold in brick and mortar locations. And they have rolled out this flavor pre-market plan by 2021, where they're going to have to pre-approve any flavors offered on the market before any competitor can offer them in stores. So what is Juul's response to this? Well, we do think that the FDA has really taken a strong stance on this, and therefore Juul has to follow suit. So they still sell attractive flavors online, but their brick and mortar selling process has really been transformed. So we see our opportunity as Juul's board of directors as low. Next, let's take a look at Juul's marketing campaign. So Juul's marketing campaign has been some of the most discussed hot topic for some of their unethical practices. Here you can see examples of their marketing advertisements. You see, look, it's colorful, there's young people, it's trendy, they're dancing, almost flirting with the Juul. None of this to me says this is a device that is shifting currently addicted adult smokers to a quitting mechanism device. This really looks like you're creating an addiction, it's fun, and it's getting teens hooked on something new and trendy. And so they were giving these marketing campaigns in places like Times Square, music festivals, Vice Media, so really flashy, attractive locations. And as we mentioned before, they're giving out free samples of Juul in clubs. So how can you make a decision about your health benefits of quitting an addiction in a club with loud music and a party atmosphere? So the government response to this has been that all marketing and sales tactics must be submitted to the FDA before they're rolled out, and free samples are banned. Juul's response is that they have taken some steps by deleting their Facebook and Instagram, and also changing their advertising campaigns by making them more muted and cropped heads, but still that perception of Juul as a quitting mechanism and not a new fun and trendy device still exists. So we see the opportunity for improvement within marketing as very high. Our last category that we're going to look at is distribution. So right now, a lot of adolescents are getting their Juuls based upon eBay, social circles, so maybe getting it from an older classmate. And previously, underage users buying these devices in stores were receiving no age verification process, so they weren't even being ID'd at a 7-Eleven, let's say. So the government response to this has been that the FDA has mandated sectioned off age-verified areas within retailers, so if you're a minor, you can't just go walk into the Juul section. And they've also partnered with eBay to prevent the sales of Juul on that online platform. Juul's response is twofold. So in one way, they did partner with a third-party age verification service online. So if you want to buy Juul online, you have to put in credentials such as your name, your phone number, your address, and the last 4 digits of your social security number. And they're actually matching that to public records to make sure that you are of age. So that's a very strong stance, and we think that's great. On the other hand, they are partnering with their parent company, Altria, to get very prime shelving location on those retailers. So for the best, hottest, new, trendy products that have that prime location in stores, that's where Juul pods are being sold because of the push that they have with Altria. So we also see the opportunity for improvement within distribution as moderate. So looking at these 4 areas that we just evaluated, we noticed that nicotine content as well as marketing are our 2 main areas that we can target today and should be prioritized when creating a solution. So to dive deeper into that solution, Susan's going to walk you through it.
So we've got 2 different initiatives going on here. So the first part is going to be to rebrand Juul's starter pack to be more in line with the mission statement and show that this really is a product targeted at adults who are trying to quit. And then the second part of the issue is we do have a problem, and the company plays a role in trying to figure out how to combat this teen vaping issue, because one problem was created in trying to solve another problem. So there's also the youth initiative piece of that's going to tackle a separate issue. So the important point that we're trying to make with this strategy is that the key issue here is we need to shift the perception of what teens view as something fun and recreational. So this isn't something fun and recreational. This is something for adults to use who are trying to quit smoking and not have that nicotine addiction that they're dealing with. So the first piece that I'm going to speak about is that starter pack overhaul, dealing with changing the product and then partnering with My Quit Band. So as Olivia previously mentioned, the 2 issues with the nicotine are that it's this very high content in comparison to what it should be, and the inconsistent labeling is misleading users as to what they're actually intaking. And so what we're going to do with the Juul new starter kit that we propose to you today is to tailor a starter kit with lower dose pods to, again, target that adult market and shift that perception. And the second piece of it is to offer it as a bundle with our Might Quit band partnership, which is basically a band that we'll expand upon later, but it's sort of like a Fitbit, if anyone has one of those, and it tracks how much smoke intake you're having every single day, how many times you smoke, how many puffs you take, what triggers your cravings. So all of that can be tracked within that band and that application. So this is kind of a little graph of why we're recommending that 1.7 to drop from 5% nicotine to 1.7%. So this is what's recommended for new users. So a 1.7% pod is equivalent to a smoker that smokes 1 pack a day. So that would be tailored to those smokers. There will also be a 3% pack that deals with smokers who smoke about 2 packs per day. So this is, again, more in line with what the international markets are doing, but it's also bringing that content down to really, truly target that adult smoker that wants to get off that addiction and not give them a content that's higher and is not truly helping them. And of course, here we've got sort of what the new products would look like with the warning label that's mandated, and then that 1.7 strength with 20 milligrams per milliliter, which is, again, that labeling by volume, so it's in line with what's going on in the market. Now I'm going to pass it on to Natalia to explain My Quit Band a little more.
Right, so to further align with our target audience, we suggest Juul partners with My Quit app and the band. So this would entail some support, so personalized support system for the user. The user will now be able to track their intake, also track their cravings, and also monitor their savings and how much they're saving versus having a cigarette. So it really puts accountability to the user to be able to track what they're doing and make them more inspired to want to quit smoking. So this is what we would introduce as a bundle. So not only would we introduce the starter kit as a standalone, but we'd also introduce a Juul Quit kit that comes with the starter pack that Susie just mentioned, and also the Quit band. So this would provide a really transparency to the user. They're able now to track their intake, and it also allows Juul to realign our mission to our values of making sure it's to quit smoking, not as a fun device. And overall, what we would do to implement this into the stores is that we would phase out the 5% offerings that are currently on the shelves, phase those out for 6 months that are 5%, put in these 2 new starter kits, and then the 5% pods would only be available online. All right, now I'll pass it on to Stephanie to talk about the second part of our strategy.
With the youth initiative side of our strategy, Juul will partner with FlySense Detection, a real-time vaping and sound detection solution. Schools have been struggling with e-cigarette usage by students, rising 78% from 2017 to 2018. Juul plans to combat this issue by donating $10 million to FlySense Technologies, and since they are the market leader within the e-cigarette industry, this will persuade other e-cigarette brands to take part in their corporate social responsibility initiative. FlySense provides assistance to teachers and schools by providing access to areas where a camera cannot be placed. FlySense also recognizes sound disturbances that may indicate some type of violence, such as bullying. This device also provides users with real-time 24/7 alerts with 0 delay and notifications. And then with FlySense, schools who have already implemented this technology have seen a 70% decrease in students using vaping devices on campus in schools. Schools have admitted that vaping has created an atmosphere of mistrust between students and teachers, but with Juul investing in this technology, they will be able to provide a healthier learning environment for schools. And then overall, with this strategy from the My Band Quit, and then with the nicotine levels all the way to FlySense, we'll be able to shift perception to teens as a recreational device to a device that should only be used by active adult smokers who are actively trying to quit. Now I'll pass it off to Justin, who will go into the financials of the strategy.
After the CEO went on trial and admitted that the health risk of tobacco products can cause cancer, 46 states filed a lawsuit against the big 4 tobacco firms at the time. In this, their mission was to recoup some of the health-related costs that were associated with cancer and all the different medical costs that this was causing on the different states. For example, the total cost for tobacco companies because of this agreement was $206 billion over 25 years and still continues today with $9 billion in annual perpetuity. Now, with our strategy, the main point that we want to drive away is that we want to invest in health and transparency to ensure our product sustainability in the future. Now, with our strategy, wanting to reduce the nicotine content from 5% to 1.7% will have adverse effects on our top line revenue. However, we expect only a loss of 3.64% of revenue if we lose 15%. Now, the second part of our strategy with the MyQuit ban is focusing on the 1.3 million US smokers who quit every year. Now, if we can capture 10% of the quitter market and get them to align with Juul and build on this idea of Juul is this quitting mechanism, we can expect an increase in sales of 0.85% revenue. With our strategy and with our recommendation, we address 3 critical issues. First, ethical. We are following the UN sustainability practice of 3A, focusing on the underage youth of using tobacco for ages 15 and under. Second, we are following all the legal implications and that are necessary that the FDA is putting forward, and we are actively following suit and building upon their ideas to market this epidemic. Continuously, even though our strategy will incur short-term financial losses, we are creating a product that's sustainable for the future of our company and for the future to transform the cigarette industry and improve the lives of 1 billion current adult smokers. Thank you.
Thank you. Now is the part where our judges get to ask questions off the screen. And I'll start off by asking a question that goes to the ethics. So you addressed the lawsuits that came from smoking. And that was a very interesting shift. And it created a very expensive solution. Is part of what you're introducing about the ethics, or do you see this as a cost-saving mechanism for any potential future lawsuits?
With that question, we have to look at it 2 sides. We are a business, and we need to look at it from a financial perspective because our shareholders play a key ingredient in this. Because of our 35% stake with Altria, we have a commitment also to Altria stakeholders now. But with this, not only is the legal implication, we have to look at the ethical side of that. The ethical side of that is we have created the new generation of addicted smokers, and there has been consequences for that in the past. If we do not make mistakes and we do not rectify what we learned from history, we are doomed to repeat them in the future. And with our strategy, we are taking the past actions of what the government has realized is wrong, and we are taking a step forward now to prevent that and taking steps that the government recognizes and the community recognizes that we want to be active in this conversation. Yes, we are shielding ourselves from the financial risk associated with these lawsuits and legal implications, but we are doing it with our intent is good. Our intent is to improve the lives of 1 billion adult smokers, and through this strategy, that's what we are trying to push.
So to add on to what Justin said and to address your question, Ashley, I don't think we brought up the $209 billion that had gone to lawsuits just to say, oh my gosh, we need to avoid that, so let's implement this new strategy. That's also a figure that, excuse me, courts determined was the overall financial health cost to users, to American citizens, based upon the tobacco industry. So it's not just about mitigating lawsuit expenses, although of course as a company we would be interested in doing that. It's also about that's the impact of people's health, I mean that many dollars of health expenses. So we're also trying to mitigate all these prolonged health problems that could happen in the future by offering these alternative solutions. But as a company, of course, we need a little bit of financial impetus to get that rolling into place. Otherwise, Juul may just say, we're making a lot of money, we have a $4 billion valuation, let's just continue on that trend because it's great for our shareholders. Yeah.
So on your financial analysis of the proposal, have you taken into account worldwide smoking or just the U.S.?
Just the U.S. to begin.
So isn't Juul selling worldwide?
Yes, they are selling worldwide, but We're gonna start with our strategy rolling out these new starter packs as well as fly scents within, the United States schools. We're gonna start within the US and just test that out initially, just because this will be a big shift in our product offerings. And then I think that's a good point. We will have to expand internationally as well.
But to kind of build on that, the 1.7% is already mandated nationally. For example, in Israel, the Israeli government pulled 90,000 devices from stores and transitioned it from the 5% to the 1.7%. So it's already being tested in those markets, and by reducing our nicotine content, it makes our distribution channel more flat across the world.
So, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
If we're operating from the proposition that vaping is less damaging to your health than smoking a traditional combustion cigarette, and we want to encourage people to transition from combustion cigarettes to vaping, we, I think, need to make sure that that product then is at least as appealing to people who are already tobacco users. Do you see these proposed changes as making our product less appealing? Because everyone knows their cigarette brand. If they're a smoker, they're familiar with those cigarettes. They ask for that brand. They recognize the packaging, the brand marks. We have to grab their attention if we want to help them.
Right.
So is this? I guess I'd like to hear your feedback on your proposed strategy and how how that might impact our ability to, what I would argue from our company's perspective is to help smokers by adopting our product.
Right. And I think that's a very valid concern, and that's the essentially cost-benefit trade-off. And I think that's also where the statistics that show that a 3% nicotine content is already equivalent to smoking 1 pack a day. So yes, we do need to make it equivalent to those chain smokers, but how much nicotine do you really need to make it attractive to them? Because in our eyes, making a nicotine content higher than what they're already experiencing with those cigarettes is unethical, because you're almost tricking them into just getting addicted to a new product while not actually diminishing some of those harmful chemicals that they're already taking.
If I may add, also online sales will have the 5%, 3%, and also the 1.7. So they just have to go online to get that alternative, because in stores they'll only have the 1.7.
And kind of just lastly to build off that, we need to remember our competitive advantage of what makes Juul, why when you take a hit of Juul, why people are attracted to it. And that's because of our patented nicotine salts that we use in our products. So nicotine salt is what's in the pods rather than when you smoke it. It's able to transfer into your body in a much easier way than a normal combustible cigarette. So it's the delivery is more instant to you. So you get that same kind of feel as your traditional buzz from a cigarette.
Which is also an issue if you're looking from a teen perspective who has never smoked cigarettes. So your question is super valid. It's almost, these levers. We don't want to make it too attractive that all teens want to smoke it, but we don't want to make it too boring that current cigarette users aren't incentivized to get off their cigarettes. So it's working to find that delicate balance of how can we suit both parties' needs and really showcase to teens this product is not for you. And I think that's what we were trying to show by our FlySense partnership, by introducing the MyQuip band. So this is, imagine if you're a teen and you just got this cool new trendy product, and then you open it up and you see this, not very attractive band in there that's designed just for quitting smoking. That sends a message to you that really says, okay, maybe this product isn't for me. What is this product's intended use? And so those are the levers we're trying to play with.
So my question is, I have seen the e-cigarettes. Some of them are very attractive to teens, and I have seen that they put on them made in China. Now, I know they're made in China, but do you know what other countries are involved in this, and how deep is the benefit to different partners in making these e-cigarettes?
So in many of the other countries, especially in Europe and China, the main, in those markets, still combustible cigarettes are the primary seller in those markets. There has not been a very big shift in those markets of switching to e-cigarette products. It is very still ingrained in those markets of combustible cigarettes. So, but however, in the US is where we have started to see the primary transition of this vape culture. This is where it's began. This is where it's kind of been born. It has not fully spread all the way to across international markets. Even though they are manufactured and produced in those markets, they're not being sold at nearly the rate at which they're being utilized in the United States.
One of the reasons I'm on the board of Jewel is because we make a lot of money. We're trendy, and we've got a really exciting image. And I appreciate the fact that we want to make a shift to do what's right. But I also very much like the fact that we are the 70-some% of the market. And I don't want to see a decrease in that. With the kids, Jewel is not just a brand, it's now a verb. They were jeweling. Did you know that this kid was jeweling in the bathroom? Parents say, were you jeweling last night? I mean, there are a lot of different, this has become part of teenage life and excitement. I don't want to see our revenue go down because of this. So how do you make sense of how do you keep our revenue going up with taking that group out of the market? I don't disagree that group should be out of the market, but what are we doing to continue to keep our revenues and even increase them over time on what we promised to our shareholders?
So if you look at our competition from an e-cigarette perspective, there's all of those other players that we're currently dominating, like Orange and all those other e-cigarette competitors. But if we also look at substitute products, we're also competing with nicotine gum. We're competing with nicotine patches. We're even competing with the quick cold turkey method. We're looking at all those different methods that current smokers are utilizing. And so that's why we think that our partnership with the MyQuit band is really going to be an incentive, because currently very few of those other substitute products for a smoking quitting method are using any kind of technology. And wearable technology, tracking analytics, tracking metrics that can be on an app on your smartphone are very attractive to those 1.3 million smokers in the US who try to quit every year. And so how can we pull away from the teens who look at this as a fun, trendy advice and really be that one provider who all current smokers go to for quitting? Because right now, a lot of people don't even view Juul as an e-cigarette. They just view it as kind of this device. E-cigarette and Juul are almost in their separate categories, like you mentioned. It's its own verb. And so to us, we need to be that go-to provider as the quitting method for cigarettes, and that's why we need to shift. Because I think even some adults who are currently struggling with smoking addiction view these trendy ads and they almost think that's not for me. That's for kids. That's just this fun device. It's not like an actual scientific solution. It's not medically backed and things like that.
I got a couple of questions. Following that statement, we are trying to gain in a declining market, which is the adult smokers who should be quitting, are stopping smoking more rapidly than the young smokers picking it up.
Sure.
So we're going to gain in a declining market and lose in a growing market. How would that balance my revenue streams if we are not considering Asian countries, which are the highest smokers, for example?
Juul's estimated profits what was it, 2019 or 2018, are $3.4 billion. That is still such a small market share of the entire cigarette sales total. The top producer, Philip Morris, in 2018 brought in $28 billion in revenues totals for cigarette sales. So that's just one of the major companies at play. So as a whole, there's a huge market potential to continue to grow and still attract all those different users who are currently using combustible cigarettes. And then as we continue to attract those users in the market and US leads the way to the switching of vaping, that's going to grow into the international markets as well. And then we can continue our campaigns to working in those areas to start converting those different countries and getting them to use this new form of getting rid of combustible cigarettes. So it's all a process. This is not going to happen overnight. This is to go into those other markets, continue our revenue stream. We are going to continue in the US, getting that transition, and then bringing it over to other markets as well. And we are in other markets as well, just not at the sheer size. And through our efforts, we can get there and we can convert more and more people every day as the technology becomes more popular, as it's already has been exploding.
I will also add to that, in 2018, August 2018, Juul implemented the 3% already before we even created them, and those are already in stores. So the mint and the Virginia tobacco flavors, the 3% is in stores and online. And these projections, which are 3 times what the revenue was, or what the sales were supposed to be in this past year, 2018, that's already including that 3% that is sold. So it is showing that that 3% is still attractive to consumers and people are still buying it. So they're buying the 5%, but they're also buying the 3%, and it is still predicted to continue to grow, just including that 3% already.
And my second question is about your online verification. How would you prevent my younger kid picking up my older kid's identification and going online and buying the stuff, which has happened? I mean, in physical verification, people use other people's driver license and deal with that.
So I think Joel's looking into a couple of different ways. So right now, I actually went through the age verification process. I was almost like a case study for this case, and it only asked me, like you said, information that I could easily just steal from my friend if they gave me their credentials. They're also looking into things such as having to upload a selfie with your ID next to your face. So that would provide almost like a double evidence that this actually is you. Furthermore, I think a lot of companies, when they're looking at age verification online, are looking at things such as biometrics. So that was like thinking about the fingerprint that works on your phone, or even taking a selfie that matches a public record with your cell phone camera. And so I think that would be a great avenue for Juul to explore to really make sure that these age verification services are working, maybe incorporating a little more technology. But I did think that the online verification process that Juul had implemented was pretty savvy, and it did create some barriers to entry. It wasn't just, oh yeah, I'm 21 and here I go. It did create a couple roadblocks if you really weren't. So we did commend them for those efforts that they had taken so far, because that must not be cheap.
I have a question in that area that relates. So in high schools, I have a high schooler, so I'm kind of like familiar with the problem. And middle school. So these kids get their e-cigarettes from an older sibling. So how can we stop that? How can we? There's no way, right? An adult can't even get involved and purchase many and then pass it on to somebody that goes to high school, and then they sell it to everybody.
So the number one cause of teenagers using these products is social circles and peer pressure. Now, with this, we're trying to shift the public perception of what Juul is. Part of how our mission statement and realigning, kind of focusing on our values of what we're trying to bring. Focusing in the mind of a teenager that, why would I use this product? That's for quitting smoking. Teenagers aren't going out and buying, Nicorette gum to chew on in class to get that same sort of buzz. They're not doing that. Similarly, kind of to tackle the next component of the issue is that by working with FlySense, we're kind of there's already been a 70% decrease in schools that are using it. We're letting kids know that this is not okay, and we're trying to make these efforts to combat this in schools, because that's the primary place where this is all taking place. In the school bathroom, the seniors to the freshmen, try this. But if we reduce those, possible places for it to happen, that is a huge component of, kind of stabilizing where are kids, first learning about the product, where are they first trying it. If it's not appearing in schools, they're most likely not going to be, converted to their products. But now you mentioned, well, other people are bringing it in. Part of the things is this age verification now to 21. There's also a push for many big tobacco companies to want to raise the tobacco selling age now to 21, similar to alcohol. Alcohol is a problem with high schoolers still, but it's nowhere near the caliber it is as vaping anymore. It's not been on the topic of what kids and teens are doing. It's all focused around now vaping as well.
I think to Justin's point, that's why we did center our strategy on this perception shift, because you used to see cool high schoolers smoking cigarettes, and you just don't see that anymore because it's no longer identified as cool. So we need to do the same thing with Juul and just make it, Juul's not cool, right? We need to actually shift that perception. We don't need solutions that just put a Band-Aid on it. We had evaluated some other solutions, such as when you do have an app With Juul, maybe you have to use your fingerprint to unlock that app, and then that also like unlocks your Juul. But it just that sometimes adding more barriers just make things more attractive to kids. Actually, now it's just how can I get around this barrier? And I think we still do see that, with alcohol. With even though you can't drink until you're 21, it's pretty cool when you're 17 to try a beer because you're not allowed. And so we don't want to put a band-aid solution. We just actually want people to know in their minds like this isn't for me. Let's go do something else.
I think the flavoring, all these exotic flavoring, and the way the e-cigarette looks is very attractive to these young kids. So if there was any way to make it more adult type, an adult man is not going to quit. It's not looking to, raspberry flavor to quit. Right. So like men, just keep it simple. I wish that would happen.
And teenagers using tobacco products is not new. They have been using tobacco products in the past. For example, the main one that is being used in schools is dip. And so at least if they are switching to Juul from dip, it is a much healthier alternative and doesn't need to nearly as problems, but it all goes to that perception. So why students dip isn't growing as much when people think, using dip, or they see kids, spitting in a bottle in class, you're like, oh, that's disgusting. Like, what are you doing? Yes, Juul doesn't have that kind of negative mindset, but it's also that mindset of like, that's not something like, that is a negative product that's going to have these health benefits. That goes to what we said earlier about the 66% only think there's flavoring when that is just not true. And it's also about the educational awarenesses that we need to bring in schools. And Juul there has been a commitment for Juuls to invest in public health, especially in schools.
So I had a question on the financial aspect of it. You provided some scenarios for potential revenue declines based on implementing this strategy. Can you tell me a little bit more about?
Can you go to the Excel? That would just be a little bit.
Yeah, go ahead.
What do you specifically?
I'm just interested in sort of what information you relied on to come up with those, particularly, I mean, we're looking out for the future of the company here, so I'm going to hope for the best and plan for the worst, right? So your worst case scenario for top line revenue decline, can you tell me a little bit more about sort of what went into those calculations?
So let's just preface this, it is difficult as Juul was just acquired by Altria, so they have no public financial statements yet, so the numbers we were able to find online as your consultants were limited in scope, so we had to work with what we had. So we started with our 2018 annual revenue of $1 billion. We knew that the devices that were sold in 2017, because we're actually impacting the device, were roughly 16 million. We're going to assume that half of these devices that we found that were sold were starter kits, which is what we want to target, because the starter kit is one of Juul's best-selling items. They charge roughly $45 per starter kit, and so annual revenue for a starter kit would be roughly $240 million. So from our 1 billion, we're looking at roughly 240 million. So that's kind of the scope we were looking at. Now we're going to assume we take away that 5%, which, as you mentioned, that is attractive to people, but it is good, for the future of public health. So what's the initial decline we could expect? We did a best, worst, and base case scenario. So of this 240 million, could we expect to lose 10%, 15%, 20% of sales? And then we compared that to the overall top line revenue of what we knew was 1 billion. And those are the figures that we got. Hopefully this would be more like an initial shock, just as we pull that shock, that product back and people are like, oh, I really like that 5%, that was so addictive. But that once people actually kind of adapt to that and that becomes the norm, we wouldn't see those declines year over year. Looking at the MyQuit revenue, so while this is more of a cost generating strategy, hopefully the MyQuit strategy can be a little more revenue generating, as we are trying to capture those 1.3 people who are trying to quit every year. And as I mentioned before, we want to be that go-to solution for I'm going to quit cigarettes. Juul's the place to to do that. They're kind of the market leader there. So if 1.3 million smokers quit every year, and we charge $65 for this new starter kit, which includes my little MyQuit band, similar to the Fitbit, what percent of the market can we capture now? That's kind of our thinking. So worst case, we can only capture 5% of these 1.3 million. Base case 10%, best case 15%. And these are kind of our anticipated revenues over time. As we begin to understand that market more and more, hopefully we can be more successful on that front. So those were our back of the envelope financials that we could do with the limited scope of numbers we had to work with, but that was our thinking. So if the decreased nicotine is kind of cost generating, hopefully we can capture more of those smokers who do need a solution. And then of course we included our fly sense to schools, which would just be a donation in technology.
Thank you. At this point, we go out of our roles and we give feedback to the team. Who'd like to start?
Well, I like your presentation. Slides were good. A little too busy for me to see. Maybe if you put the topic and then the description at the same time. Maybe just fly it in later after you've told me what it is. Just leave it there for me if I want to go back to it. That kind of makes it easier for me to see what are the main points or the topics to begin with. I think given the limited financial data you have, you've done a good job on that.
We have like 2 members to work with.
Basically, the other thing that I like to find out is what is the likelihood of a smoker quitting by using your method here versus the current existing competition for quitting smoking? What is the success rate for the existing companies and their methods, and what would be our approach here, the success rate? That would be very beneficial for me to know as a decision maker whether we are going to go in that direction or not.
Overall, I thought the presentation was very good. I thought the presentation materials were visually compelling. I think they're modern and sleek. This actually was more than I expected. I was pleasantly surprised with the underlying financial analysis that you were able to present. I'll tell you, in 1997, as a student, I was in this competition. My team won here at LMU, and overall, and I mean, a couple of you are very gifted when it comes to really stand out in terms of presentation skills. So I appreciate that overall. I think from my perspective, the biggest challenge I have with sort of the overall concept is just that at the end of the day, if we're interested in making a profit and if we accept the sort of underlying proposition that our product is healthier than cigarettes, I mean, if all nicotine is bad, right? The pizza that I ate was bad, but if you're going to smoke one way or another, people are still better off using our product, right? And so there's that balance between the potential for reducing adoption or use of our product. Are we going to lose those people back to combustible cigarettes anyway? And that's the one thing that I think anybody sitting in our seats would probably struggle with a little bit is, yeah, your points are all valid, but is it still a lesser harm? Even if we are making the product more appealing to young people or addictive, would they go and smoke anyway, right?
I enjoyed your presentation, very well done. I realized that this is a big problem and it's going to take a while. I would have liked to see more solution to just not make this attractive to the young people at all, but I realize that's very difficult to do. But thank you, I enjoyed it.
I thought you were fantastic. I did not anticipate all of the media that you would present. I thought that it was varied enough to grab people with the financial projections, with sort of the very pop culture portion that you set up, and then a lot of the statistical analysis was, I thought, very easy to read. And I also really thought that you were well organized. You talked about an intro, the problem, the legal, and you got to the ethical issue very well. A couple of things that I wanted to recommend. One is that I wasn't sure where we were going right at first. I wanted to know what the solution was going to be before we talked a lot about the problem. Second, to echo what Robert said, is that I wanted to know as a board member, what's the cost, what's the impact? As a parent of someone who is very much in this, this is a big issue, I'm so glad to see that a company would address this in this manner, and I think it was right on in terms of what case you chose and your analysis for it. putting myself in the role of a board member, what I care about is the revenue. And so I would want to know, how much is Juul compared to cigarettes? How much is Juul compared to other products that you would use to stop smoking? Because if I have a limited budget, most of us do, I want to know how much that's going to cost me. And if that's, that will be a driver on how effective the financials are. But overall, I think it was fantastic.
Been a lot of fun doing it.
That's great insight.
Yeah. Thank you guys so much.
Very good.
Thank you.